The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. As you can see, we have myself, Liz Burkhart. I'm the Director of Marketing with Agile Education Marketing, and I'm joined by Jay Sivan-Kachala from IESD Market Research. And we partnered this year, as well as last year, on our annual teacher survey. And he is going to be taking us through the detailed findings for this report. And one of the things I want to point out before we get into some of the housekeeping things and the format of what our session is going to be like today, one of the things that we did was we put some market intelligence data from Agile and we attached it to the records of everyone that we sent an invitation to. And what that allowed us to do, and it basically allowed Jay to do for us, is to look into different aspects of districts, enrollment, type of, is it a rural market or an urban market, the Title I levels, as well as the grade levels of the school, and look and see if there's any differences that are meaningful in the responses from people from those different groups. So there were a couple things that we found that were pretty interesting, so he will share those. So be on the lookout for those, and I wanted to just sort of talk a little bit about how we were able to do that and still maintain a really nice survey size. So we did this, gosh, how long ago? I think, Jay, you're going to take us through all the details, methodology, and when we did this and the response levels. Okay, so Jay's going to give us all of those details. So let me get into a couple housekeeping things. So we are going to be on video today, myself and Jay, to make it a little more human. I know that we're all living in a very different world than we were a few months ago, and so we felt like a little bit of human contact might be welcome by everyone. I know I love to see Jay's face. And so the other thing is we definitely know that everyone's got a different working environment now, so please don't worry about it if you've got dogs distracting you, kids, partners. It's all good. We're recording this and you will get the link to the recording, so if you have to leave us for a little bit or leave us halfway through, you will get the recording. You can watch it at your leisure. Don't worry. When it comes to questions, if you wouldn't mind asking them as we go, so that you've got them fresh in your mind, but we'll go ahead and wait until the end to take those. And so Jay and I'll go through those questions as well. And I also want to introduce Kara Murphy, who is our marketing manager at Agile, and she is going to be our behind the scenes person. And so if you ask, if you have a technical question or anything that isn't directly related to the content, Kara is the person who's going to be helping you out and responding. So use the chat if you don't mind for that, but she's also monitoring the questions, and she and I will go through those at the end. But she'll be the person, so if you see something from Kara, she will be the person responding to you. And like all of us, we've got family members home and kids home and dogs running around, so you may hear some ambiance in the background, and that's totally okay, and we all have come to expect that. Let me see and make sure that I've covered all of this. Okay, so yeah, so that's the format or that's the housekeeping thing. So let's get into the format, right? So Jay put the deck together for us, and there's a couple different key sections to help pull the data together to make it a little bit more meaningful and talking about how you can actually use this data and make it actionable. But one of the things that Jay did that I thought was it was really nice, and I think it's going to make this a lot more relevant to all of us, is every section we're going to start with a polling question. So you'll see that pop up on your screen, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing what you think the responses were, what's your hunch, and we'll sort of get a feel for how different our sort of notions and our preconceived notions, right, of this market are versus what we actually found when we surveyed the teachers themselves. And maybe your answer isn't right for the whole population, but maybe it's one of those different segments that it is true for. So we'll dig into all of that as well. So Jay, what else do you want to let us know as preparation? And I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, I'll just say that our firm, Interactive Educational Systems Design, we have two specialties. One is research, and that could be quantitative research, qualitative research, surveys, focus groups, in-depth interviews, and a whole bunch of document review kinds of projects. And our total focus is on the education market, all the way from pre-K to higher ed. So that's our specialty. And with that, we can start. So you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so this was a national survey that we conducted in the spring, this past spring, and it was sponsored by Agile, and it was designed in collaboration with Agile. Agile recommended some questions, reviewed all the questions, and we also worked back and forth to make sure that we got the right people invited to take the survey. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see what the focuses are. We're going to start with questions that got at teachers' sense of their own identity as teachers. We're going to talk about classroom funding and spending, teacher discounts, and information sources that teachers rely on. So we can go on. Next slide. And here you can see the mix of teacher profiles based on all of the demographic data that we collected. A lot of this data were data items that existed in the Agile database, and in some cases we asked some demographic questions directly of the teachers. So the takeaway, we got a really good mix of teachers, and we were very happy with this sample of 1,600 plus teachers. Next. So to set the context for everything else that's going to follow, we wanted to dig into teachers' sense of their own identity as teachers. So let's start with a polling question. So you get to role play what teachers think. So how important is being a teacher to teachers' sense of identity? And you can select one of these. Is it very important? Is it somewhat important? Is it not very important? Is it not at all important? So go ahead and vote. What do you think?
Okay, the responses are coming in. We'll give it another couple seconds. Okay, well, I think, Kara, that we can be done. I mean, it's been pretty consistent the whole time we've had it open. It's about 77% would say very important and 23% somewhat important.
Interesting. Pretty close to what the teachers felt themselves. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, I think the big takeaway here is that being a teacher is really important. It's a really important aspect of their lives, and it helps shape their thinking and how they feel about themselves and the world. We found that more than 80% said that it's a very important aspect of their lives, and it was competing with how they think about their family role. So that will give you a sense of how important this is. 85% that said that it was important, an important part of their identity, and around 78% said it influences the way they see the world. And a smaller majority, but nonetheless a majority, said they also identify with the school where they work. And next slide will show some of this in graph form. So you can take a few seconds to look at that. This graph is the importance of aspects of life to teachers' sense of identity. And you can see that being a teacher and my family role is at the top.
Yeah, and Jay, thank you for working with me on this organization, because I think that this is something that I always have to remind myself of, and this is why connecting with teachers is so important. Connecting with them as teachers and as the professionals that they are. And so I think that this is a really nice way to set the stage for everything else that we have to share with everyone today. It's really surprising to me how much a part of their identity being that teacher is.
I think the next slide will also show that, because that's the other graph question, perspectives on being a teacher.
Yeah.
An important part of their identity, influences how they see the world, creates an immediate bond with other teachers. I think what that tells us is that for lots of teachers, not all, but lots, it's not just a job, it's a calling. Mm-hmm. And so if you can create a bond through that, That would be very helpful. So that's good for the next slide.
Okay, so we're moving.
Go on to the next slide. Sure.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So the key takeaway here is if you want to create that bond with teachers, find ways to honor and reward teachers for their service as teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just take this opportunity to just share a few things we learned from that analysis, that segmentation analysis that Liz was talking about earlier. We found that this tendency towards finding, teaching being an important aspect of their identity, it was the greatest when we looked at school level. It was the greatest. The tendency was for elementary school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting, we didn't find differences when we looked when we dissected by district size, but we found that teachers in large districts were the most likely to rate several other aspects of their life unrelated to teaching as highly important. And we found that the same thing was true when we looked at segmentation by Title I funding. It was for the high Title I districts. And high Title I in this case meant they were either equal to or greater than 50% free reduced price lunch eligible students. And that's a standard measure of socioeconomic status. And now we can move on to classroom funding and spending. And another polling question.
Yeah, Kara, if you would get a poll out to everyone. Thank you.
Are school budgets adequate to support teaching and learning in the classroom?
This is interesting. We'll give it another couple seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, similar to before, it's been pretty consistent the whole time we've had it open. Okay. I think we're good, Kara. Thank you. So, so 93% feel that teachers don't have adequate budgets. But they say no, budgets are inadequate. 93%.
So let's go on to the next slide. Now, when we asked the teachers, there was about an even divide between teachers who felt that their school budget was adequate and teachers who don't. And that may speak to that economic divide in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And what we also found across several items that there's a strong tendency for teachers to spend their own money to support their teaching.
Yeah.
So let's dig in a little bit deeper with the next slide. So here you can see that the vast majority said they had to spend their own money if inadequate funding was the case in their schools. More than half of them reported that classroom supplies were inadequate, and just under half said that needed instructional resources were unavailable. And when either of those are the case, either they're missing classroom supplies or they need instructional resources, teachers tend to fill in with their own money. However, we also found that teachers tend to spend their own money regardless of the situation in their local school.
That's interesting. Are we ready?
And we can we can go on to the next one.
Okay.
We also found that most teachers are spending more than $100 of their own money, and many are spending more than $250 of their own money. And the next slide will show you that this is a bit of an aberrant year because of the coronavirus. So we've got a little bit of a divide in terms of the spending before schools closed and since schools have closed. So before schools closed, about 3/4 spent more than $100, with 44% spending more than $250. Since schools have closed, we've got slightly less than a quarter spending more than $100, with only 11% spending more than $250. And especially noteworthy, about a third said that since schools closed, they have spent nothing. But once we go back to a normal year, whenever that will be, we can probably expect that top graph to be more the case, because that's fairly consistent with the data we got from last year as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you for that, for doing some of that comparison. A lot of this just reinforces the findings that we've seen over the years. Okay, are we ready to move?
We can go to the next slide.
Great.
And here we've just created a kind of a thought list of opportunities for vendors. And what we can see at the top is what is generally true this year and in a normal year when we do the study. So if schools are open, you're going to be selling classroom supplies, student rewards, instructional resources, and reading materials for students to lots of teachers. They'll be ripe for those sales.
Mm-hmm.
And if school buildings are closed, you can see that some of the home kinds of supplies and equipment and technologies will probably do well. And of course, if we're in a hybrid situation, we may need all of this.
Yeah, definitely.
So we can go on to the next slide. And this slide shows the difference in what teachers spent on before schools closed and since. So you can see that it was predominantly classroom supplies and student rewards for most people, and also other instructional resources before. But we got more of an even mix of a bunch of things since schools have closed, other supplies, instructional resources, technology for teaching at home, and also other home office equipment. So teachers basically had to reconfigure how they do things. And I think we can go on.
Okay.
So the key takeaway is that schools and teachers need to be prepared for multiple options. They might be doing completely on-site learning. They might be doing completely distance learning. And a lot of schools and districts are preparing for some kind of hybrid solution. It could be, going to school on-site 2 or 3 days a week and doing the rest at home. It could be different hours for different kids. We've heard some saying that they're going to do a week on, a week off, and nobody has a good answer. Nobody really knows how it's going to all work out.
Yeah. Oh, and Jay,
Go ahead.
something that I can add there too is we've been working to put together how to organize that information. And so far we have about 12 different scenarios across the country. So yeah, so just if it seems a bit confusing, it is, and it's going to be very locally, everything is going to be decided locally. Yeah. Okay.
And just to give you a sense, I'm here in New York State, and we've been tracking, and basically they have not created the master state plan, but they're basically saying if the transmission rate is like 5% or less, then one set of circumstances. If it goes up to 9%, a different set of circumstances. So, it's really going to depend on how the virus is doing at the time that people have to actually go back to school. One other thing, for schools that understand that either they're going to have to do some online learning or have to be prepared for online learning if circumstances change, it's an opportunity for video conferencing systems and learning management systems, and also mobile digital devices. And a lot of urban districts discovered that they have to figure out ways of getting devices and the infrastructure to support those devices out to homes. And if they don't do that, they're going to have a lot of students who are just lost.
Mm-hmm. Fair points. I think I moved us ahead a little premature.
No, that's good. That's
Yeah.
where we want to. That's
Yeah.
where we want to be. Okay. So you can see here, when we did these analyses at the school level, elementary school teachers seem to be like the greatest potential. According to metro status, urban districts, according to district size, large districts, 10,000 or more students, and by Title I, those high Title I districts. And one of the keys across all of these is those were the segments that were most likely to spend more than $250 compared to other segments. And there were other metrics as well, but they varied.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Now let's go on to teacher discounts.
Okay.
And it's time for another polling question.
Kara, would you mind sharing the poll, opening that next one for us?
So we asked teachers, what's your opinion of this statement? Offering teacher discounts gives vendors a market advantage. Did they strongly agree, somewhat agree, on the fence, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree? And please don't mark us for spelling on that second choice.
Okay, so 20% strongly agree got 20%. The highest is somewhat agree at 44%, 27% on the fence, and 10% somewhat disagree. So, 64%, our audience feels like 64% of teachers strongly to somewhat agree.
Well, what's interesting, and we can go to the next slide, is teachers were much more positive across several questions on this whole notion of teacher discounts. Mm-hmm. So we had large majorities saying they've already used teacher discounts. They prefer to buy from companies that offer them. They're more likely to buy from companies that offer them, and that they would try a brand that they haven't purchased before because of a teacher discount. And now we can go and take a look at some of the graphs. So here we can see a really large percentage, over 80%, said they already have used the teacher discount. And we can see about 75% either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed. And here was the wording of that question: what's your opinion of the following statement? In general, I prefer to buy products and services from companies that offer a teacher discount. Mm-hmm. So a little bit higher than what you all thought. So that's good news for those of you who are contemplating discounts as a way of getting to teachers. And the next slide. We also asked whether the teachers are more likely to buy from a company that offers a teacher discount. And we've got a large, more than 80% when it came to buying classroom items, and still about 75% when it came to buying personal items.
Yeah, that's always interesting to me that classroom and personal, there's definitely a higher likelihood to purchase.
Yeah. And here we tested some teacher discount offers, and you can see a really strong response for trying a brand that I haven't purchased before. That was just about 80%. But we also had about half of them saying they'd purchase more items, and about half of them saying they'd make a purchase sooner.
Okay.
We can go on to the next slide. Yeah. We were also interested in the types of products and services that teachers said they would use a discount on, and they were most likely to talk about discounts related to teaching. But we found that many teachers were also looking to use discounts for a wide variety of other kinds of products and services. And I don't know if you can make out the print here, but some of those other products and services related to personal lives were restaurants, entertainment, clothing, travel, subscription services, and you'll see some other categories there. And those are in the slides.
Yeah, and it just tracks back to that, the notion that we opened with at the beginning, right? Like, being a teacher is a really important aspect of their lives, and they will make decisions across everything based on that. So that it makes sense for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also asked them about teachers, and we found which ones were the most appealing. And 4 of them bubbled up to the top. 20% off of an individual purchase, free perks, buy one, get one free, and 10% off every purchase. And our key takeaway is that discounts work if they save teachers money, or if they get them stuff for free. Free stuff they like.
It's important to know.
Yeah. And next one, we did crosstab analysis by all of those different segmentations. The only one that kind of bubbled up to having any meaning was school level. What we found is that teachers at all school levels responded well to teacher discounts, but we had like multiple positive responses among elementary school teachers. And so that may be an indication that it's kind of like a stronger trend among elementary school teachers.
Yeah.
And now we can go on to information sources. And it's time for our last polling question.
Kara, if you would be so kind as to open that for us. Thank you so much.
Do teachers like to hear about teacher discounts directly from vendors?
Let's see. Oh, I'm going to have to open this. Okay, we're getting some results. We'll give it another couple seconds. So yeah, so the results have been consistent. So Kara, I think we're good. So Jay, 78% of people feel that yes, teachers do want to hear directly from a company about a discount. So it's 80-20 split.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. So let's go to the next slide.
Oh, give me one.
And
There we go.
And you guys are pretty good because you pretty much match what the teacher said about hearing directly. The other important takeaway is that word of mouth is one of the most frequent sources of information for teacher discounts. So it's those two things. But we wanted to drill down a little bit on what it meant to hear directly from vendors. So the next slide. So when it comes to vendor direct communication, email is likely to be a successful way of getting the word out about teacher discounts. One of the advantages of email, other than just a way of reaching teachers in a technology they use pretty much every day, is it also can contribute to the word of mouth, which is something else they really believe in, because most teachers will forward emails about some good offer to their colleagues. Also notice that about 40% said that social media was an important source, and there were several other sources in the 23 to 31% range. And again, you'll have access to these slides. Next slide.
Okay.
So the key takeaway here is consider a mixed marketing strategy that might include email, social media, the brand's website, online ads, and direct mail.
Okay.
And in this case, we did all of the usual analyses by all those segmentations, but while there were some differences, we didn't find any clear patterns to the difference.
Okay.
And I guess that gets us ready for some questions.
Questions. So, Kara, I think there's a couple that are with you, and I will go ahead and go through some of the more recent ones, more recently asked ones.
Okay, the first one I have is, what other segments or demographics do you think should be looked at in next year's survey? And is this because of the school closures and the move to virtual, and will we see any differences?
Well, looking at one that we just added for this year, I think that metro status really bore some fruit. And I think especially when we think about if COVID is still with us, then that's probably going to be a differentiator. Another one, thinking about, the coronavirus, we might want to take a look at regions, geographic region differences, especially if we can identify regions that are having a harder time with COVID versus ones that seem to have things settled.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Kara, do you have another one on your end?
Yes, I have a few more. Are there any media channels that you think are more or less well known that might be good for reaching teachers? And I mean, we saw email and social's becoming more prominent because teachers are at home, they have more time for themselves, but do you see anything else coming to the forefront?
Well, I'll just say another thing about social. There are like two flavors of social media. There are the standard kind of, you know, Facebook and, and TikTok now, but teachers are also interested in some social media sources that are specifically for teachers. And probably as a follow-up, Liz and I can talk about it. We probably could get you a list of some of those. Because there are some that teachers are actually actively involved in as teachers. Interestingly, podcasts, blogs, and influencers did not fare well in our survey. In each case, they were less than 10% of the population were interested in those.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing to me when we did see some of those newer channels just not resonating with this particular market for sure. Carrie, I think you've got one more, and then I've got a couple that have come in as well.
Yes. Do you do a lot of research projects, obviously, like you said in the beginning, in education, with how things have changed for parents, teachers, students, are there recommendations or considerations you can offer to the vendors based off of what you've seen on multiple studies?
Yeah, I'm drawing from both quantitative and some qualitative, and some of this is true all of the time, but it's especially true now. Parents and teachers are really stressed out, and if I could see you all raising your hands, me, and so they've got a lot of things competing for their responsibilities, work and family. So anything suppliers and vendors can do to make their lives easier and make their interactions with you quick and efficient. And I think online transactions would be really well received right now. As far as students, I think what we know is that students are really hungry for social contact with their peers. And so anything you can do that can support online contact, because a lot of kids are going to be relying online until this fever breaks. And then if we're talking about things that involve, kind of face-to-face contact, any ways of supporting safe contact at a distance, because they really need to get those messages again and again.
Yeah. So thank you very much for those, and thank you, Kara, for organizing those for us. So a couple of the more recent ones that have come in. I'm going to skip, Dave, I'll get to yours in a second. It's a little bit more involved. So I'm going to move to a couple more recent ones, and then we'll come back to you. So I want to make sure that you know that. So Danielle asks, did we break down any of the data by subjects taught? And I know that we didn't. So I don't know if you have thoughts. Yeah, like in the future, in the middle school, maybe high school, should we do something like that?
I think that the challenge of that is you really need a very large sample so that you can get a meaningful segment for those. And very frankly, we got a larger sample than we anticipated. We might consider that next year. And I think it's going to depend on what's happening with the schools. Generally speaking, when the schools are in session live and everything is back to normal, the sample size will probably go down because they'll be very busy. But that's one of the challenges there.
Okay. And so another question, and I've never even thought of this, so Suzanne asked, would you consider political affiliation questions in terms of segmenting responses?
Huh.
Yeah.
We could, but I don't know how comfortable they will be responding to that.
That's interesting.
One of the things we always are concerned about, even in terms of the number of questions we ask, we may have the perfect set. I mean, I've had clients that actually say, we want to ask these 50 questions. And I said, they're all great questions, but no one's going to respond. They're all going to kind of leave after this question over here. So I think it's interesting. But I I'd be afraid that we would chase a lot of people away, personally.
Yeah, and so that's really interesting. And Jay, that's one of the things that I really appreciate and have appreciated over the last couple of years is that point of view that you always bring to the table when we're talking about questions. But I do think perhaps, looking at it like by zip code or, and there's a way to sort of use data to infer some of those things if it was important to your work. But I do think that might be a turnoff question. But there's different ways to maybe understand the political landscape and how you can apply it to the answers. Okay, so
it was
let's go to Dave's.
Yeah. Oh, we did have some. You can go back and take a look at that. Some of the other competing important things in their lives, their identity. I think we got at religion, we got it at political affiliation. So you might want to just take a look at some of those things, at least for that question. And if COVID is still raging among us, it might be a stand-in might be asking people how serious they think it is. And that might get at the political divide in a way that might not offend. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's good. Okay, so we didn't have any additional come in, so let's dig into the question that Dave asked, and it's a little bit longer, and I want to make sure that I'm capturing the intent of it. So he says, regarding teacher discounts, is the pool of companies all companies, or is all companies that sell to teachers? And so I think that Dave is trying to understand sort of how we presented this to the teachers themselves. And then he goes on to say, in other words, will a teacher show a preference for literacy product X over literacy product Y if literacy product X offers a discount? Mm-hmm. Or for example, Target versus CVS, or Scholastic versus Pearson. Thank you, Dave, for giving some more context. He's streaming in now to help me make sure that I'm getting this right.
Well, I think that when you're talking about teacher resources, instructional resources, it's going to be a complicated decision for some teachers right now. For many teachers, they're really strapped for cash. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to get a better hearing, certainly, if you give a discount. Ultimately, they're going to make decisions about what they think the quality of the instruction or the practice is, how aligned it is with their own, beliefs about pedagogy. So they're not going to leave those things behind, but it's really a matter of who gets an airing and who doesn't. And so there, I think it might help. I think for non-educational stuff, certainly vendors that are developing this relationship with teachers have a better shot.
Yeah, I do too. And so another organization that we work with on this survey every year is Share ID, and we partner with them in different ways. Right. But they definitely have some data, and they've done some experimentation where it definitely shows that. And so our data really points to that, and then there's also that more qualitative actual data that shows that it can influence on the consumer brand side, for sure. So those were the questions that we had. Thank you, Dave, for going through that. I'm sure that there were lots of people who wanted a little bit more clarity on that particular nuance of this survey. So Jay, let me just, what else do you want to share with us? Like in closing, is there anything that's sort of come to you as the questions have come through, or you've thought a little bit more about the data? The report was 200 pages, and I appreciate very much that you distilled it down to really these super meaningful, super actionable aspects of it. But is there anything else that you really want to share with everyone today?
Well, I think this is not going to be something new. It's just kind of like in summary. I think that teaching really matters to teachers. If you can develop a relationship with them that shows that you are supportive, honoring of teachers in some ways, it gives you a better chance of developing them as a customer. And I guess looking at that segmentation, everything that we say seems to apply to elementary teachers in spades, and also you tend to get a stronger response, urban teachers, large districts, and also those high Title I, because they tend to be needier.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very nice way to sum up all of our takeaways. As you were giving that, your final thoughts, Nancy asked a question, and I'm going to go ahead and take this one, but definitely jump in, Jay, if you have additional stuff. She's asking, is it better to focus on teachers or on district administrators? And, in my, and I didn't, get into my particular background, education marketing, but I've been doing marketing in this market for, 15 years now. And what I've always found is it's really important to understand how the buying process works, and teachers are a very important part of it. And a lot of times what happens is principals, district leaders, school leaders will deputize what I like to refer to them as teacher influencers. They will be deputized to really take on researching a solution for a challenge, and that's kind of how it's generally approached. It's not go find an LMS, it's we have this challenge, how can we solve it? And a teacher will actually do a lot of that legwork and bring it back to a committee. So I think it's important to do both, but I think that it's always important to remember how influential teachers are, especially if it's going to directly affect the students. And something that I continue to really be impressed by is how much teachers really, really care about student outcomes. So I think that one of the things that I can also recommend to you, Nancy, and to anyone else, really think about what the end game is for the different people that you're talking to. So when you're communicating with them, you're remembering that teachers want to know how this will let them do a better job with students. Principals want to understand how everything is data driven, right, for them. So they want to understand how they can get a one-stop dashboard type read and quickly identify successes, challenges, and how to address them. So when you think about that, I think that can help you answer the question. So it might be better to streamline and prioritize, not necessarily based on a role, but maybe more based on other demographic data, which is part of the reason that I like to make sure that we have the market intelligence data segmentations as part of this, because high Title I is different than low Title I, and that might be a better way to, if you need to prioritize and only do so much, look at it not based on the role, but based on the type of district or the grade level or different aspects of that education institution versus, and go to more people, but maybe fewer institutions in one wave. As you go to market. So those are my thoughts on that.
A couple of other thoughts. There are different categories of products. If you're talking about educational products, some are system products. They tend to be either school-wide or district-wide. There's an opportunity for teachers to be influencers. In some rare cases, they may even be, thought leaders, and so they may be on the team, but it's a much more bureaucratic process, and it usually involves a lot more decision makers. When you're talking about supplemental products, sometimes teachers have their own budgets. They have a classroom budget, and also if it's going to be a school-based purchase, they're likely to have more sway over supplementals than something that's more system-wide or something that is, say, the core curriculum product. So it's really going to depend on what the product is. If you are a vendor of a non-educational product, there I would say go after teachers, but don't waste the time of administrators. If anything, it might even be a turnoff. You can address them as educators, but they're busy doing things for their schools and districts. They don't want to be bothered with you trying to sell them something else. That's just a hunch, but that's what I think.
Yeah, no, really, really good points. Thank you, Jay. So so thank you for doing this and working with us on, the survey and then putting this, our presentation together. Really useful, valuable stuff. So, we put together a webinar series for this summer, our What's Happening in Education series. And this was our second one. And so we have, teacher spending, teacher survey today. And, a couple of the themes that came out, we're going to be actually just sort of happy happenstance. They will be addressed in our next two webinars. So next week, we actually have Michael Niehoff joining us, and he is going to be going through the tomorrow's education landscape. And he is someone who has been paying a lot of attention to all the different players and points of view and how the decisions are being made and what really revolutionary changes look like potentially are going to be made in education in the coming semester, year, and several years. So I think that'll be a really interesting one to look at. But also, Brian Healy is going to be back with us in August, and he's going to be talking about influencer marketing. So I think that's going to be interesting too, to sort of learn about his take and how he's helped his clients find success using, it's social, influencer marketing in education, which I'm very interested in because, like, Jay, you and I found it's not a big, well, social is big, but in terms of influencer and, podcasts and bloggers and things like that, it didn't seem to really resonate. So I'm curious about that one. So look for the registration information on those two upcoming webinars. And also, as part of this and as we manage our back to school plans, we have available Agile Education Marketing has available two data points that you might find really useful. We've added calculated and a little bit estimated CARES Act funding at the district level, so you can kind of better understand what funds are available. And Verlin Stevens, our managing partner, actually put together a virtual readiness score for all of the schools, so you can understand their ability, aptitude, how ready they are to actually go to full online, and that can help you sort of segment and understand where different schools are at, so that your communications are more relevant and tailored for them, so they will be more engaged and more likely to open. So look for, you can talk to your account rep about either of those data points, and they can help you fold that into what you're doing and planning for back to school next year, which we know is really interesting. So with that, thank you, Kara, for helping us behind the scenes. Really appreciate all the work you do in making this very smooth for all of us. Jay, thank you so much again. Jay is with IESD Market Research, and like he said, he and his company have a lot of experience in this and really unique ways of gathering information and connecting with educators to get your research and survey programs done. So with that, I'm Liz Burkhart with Agile Education Marketing, and I really appreciate your time today and that everyone joined us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next couple webinars that we have scheduled. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.